From flooding in Charleston to the recent break-ins in the Shadowmoss subdivision of West Ashley, I speak exclusively with City of Charleston Councilman Kevin Shealy for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores, or listen to this interview later on the free Quintin's Close-Ups iHeartRadio podcast. Well, Councilman Kevin Shealy.
Yes, sir.
It's so good to see you again.
Great to see you, Quintin.
I appreciate it. I know the last time I saw you was on a very hot and sweaty day on Front Street.
Yeah.
I was trying to make it from work to here to the library to edit my interviews.
Yeah.
But boy, you have been busy lately.
Yeah, it has been busy. Yeah.
What is it like for you, Kevin Shealy, the Charleston City Councilman?
Well, Quintin, I've enjoyed being on City Council. For I guess it's been 7 months now. It's been good. Very busy, as you were saying. It's it's a very, very busy job. Maybe busier than I thought it was, and I expected it to be busy. But I appreciate the opportunity to represent the people of Charleston. I mean, it's a real pleasure to represent a great city and represent great people in this city, and I feel honored to have that opportunity, and it's been great. But like I said, it's been busy. It's it's something that takes a little bit of work. You have to do a little homework, and I have to. I get emails, text messages, phone calls, all the time, and certainly want to be very responsive to people's needs and make sure our quality of life is where it should be for the city of Charleston.
You talk about the quality of life. Let me take you to the Post and Courier. This is a headline recently from Abigail Darlington. It reads this: residents asking feds to investigate Charleston for failure to protect against flood risks. And obviously, city spokesperson Jack O'Toole said that he thinks the city rating is likely to improve, if anything, because of the ongoing efforts to address flooding. Tell me, how is the city addressing flooding right now?
Well, we are putting in new guidelines right now. Obviously, Church Creek is a very important area. The mayor has mentioned Church Creek several times, and obviously downtown is very important as well. I'm concerned about Church Creek because it runs right through my district. We have a lot of new regulations that are coming out for new builders. Obviously, we have a moratorium in place that's going to be lifted soon. There's some discussion on exactly when that's going to happen. That's been in City Council lately, but it's certainly going to be lifted before the end of the year, but with certain guidelines that are still being worked on. And some of those guidelines include, for these developers that come in, some of those guidelines include making sure that we have access to Church Creek, making sure that there's an easement and that there's areas where we can get equipment in there and keep Church Creek clear. That's one of the problems we have with Church Creek right now is that it's hard to get in there and get things cleaned out because there sometimes isn't room to get the equipment in there to take care of things. So these developers will have to allow room for that to happen.
Okay.
If you're south of the railroad tracks, I guess, the railroad tracks that run right along the side of East Ferry Road, right. If you're developing in that area, one of the things off of the Church Creek study was, or actually the number one thing was, that we're going to have some kind of protection from tidal surge flooding into the Church Creek. So we're going to be having those developers be responsible for making sure that they're protecting Church Creek if they're developing in there from tidal surge. So there's these tidal surge gates. I think on that Church Creek study basin, it was about $1.5 million that these things cost. So we're going to be telling these developers they have to help protect us. Now, if you're on the other side of the railroad tracks, you have to be able to retain water so that you're not flooding the basin if you're building in that area. So I think right now you have to hold water back for 24, but the new 24 hours, but the new regulations are going to require 72 hours of developers that are north of those railroad tracks to be able to hold that water for 72 hours. And there's a lot of ways to do that. I mean, they'll have to have basins and places where they can hold that water. But another thing that's interesting in some of this that they're talking about is, on a cumulative basis, if we can do individual holding of water, maybe it's cisterns, maybe large rain barrels, and on each of these properties so that the owners of those properties and maybe even the subdivisions themselves can retain that water and hopefully maybe be able to use that for irrigation when it's real dry, but keep that water out of there. So there's a lot of different work going on. I had put a couple of notes here. Hickory Farms is a big area where there's flooding. Of all of the things on the Church Creek Drainage Basin study, that was, all of it's very expensive, but that was the least expensive. And trying to divert water around Hickory Farms so that those properties don't flood. And when I say it was the least expensive, it's almost $500,000, so it's expensive. I told you the tidal surge protection was $1.5 million. We've got to come up with a way to put in these storm pump stations, though. That's the most expensive thing. Out of the Church Creek Drainage Basin study, I think overall it was around $44 million. The storm pump stations were $27 million. So, so we've got to come up with a way. Where that money's going to come from is a big question. We do have a new grant writer now, and we're going to be working on trying to figure out where to get that money. It's not going to happen overnight, but we're going to be pushing to try to figure out, and it's going to have to be a priority for those pump stations in Church Creek. But yeah, another big huge thing was anything north of the Village Green subdivision, which is just above Shadowmoss. Anything there, we needed to have big storage there. But overall, the idea is as development happens, we want the post-development runoff to be less than, if possible, than the pre-development with all of these ideas. So, you know, I will tell you, Councilman Griffin said this in a meeting not too long ago. We have to depend on the expertise of a lot of engineers. We don't have that education and that background. But there are a lot of engineers working on Church Creek Basin right now. And, you know, we're learning very, very quickly. Councilman Griffin and I both sit on this committee, and we're learning very quickly, talking to engineers, and you know, there is a plan. It just doesn't happen overnight. But I do believe that when we start piecing these things together, it's going to be better. It's going to be better, but it's going to take time. It's not going to happen this month. You know, it's not going to happen in the next, probably by the end of this year. But things are in place to improve that Church Creek drainage basin. But we have to stay on top of it. We have to try to push as fast as we can to get things moving as quickly and start putting things in place, and you know, help that whole flooding situation. Obviously, Church Creek isn't the only place. There's other places in West Ashley that are having flooding problems. In Providence Commons, for instance, there was a backup of drains, and we couldn't figure it out for a little while. It took a few days. This was back in May.
Oh, yeah.
What was causing it, you have these drainage pipes. Well, there was a 5-gallon bucket that had gotten shoved into a drainage pipe. Well, this one drainage pipe had backed up, and there were other things, debris and stuff, but the 5-gallon bucket inside there was causing other debris to be caught, and it was causing the whole neighborhood to back up. And this was a long drain pipe, so it took a while. It took a couple of days actually for them to get in there and get that thing out. Once they did, we haven't had any more issues. But you know, there's a lot of things a lot of debris, a lot of different things that wash up in these drain systems. And once we got that going, it helped the whole community. So there is a regular maintenance schedule.
Okay.
I guess my question as a new councilman is that regular maintenance schedule enough? Do we need to get in there more often than we're getting in there right now? I'll tell you, there's a situation between Boone Hall Road and over near the old Middleton High School, Boone Hall Road and Wallenberg is a community in there that floods a lot. When I was talking to some of our stormwater management people, they said the problem is, just like that 5-gallon bucket, they're seeing things washing up in there that's clogging the place up. And I was even told that they found an old box TV that was either washed up or thrown in there, you know, that caused a lot of backup. We're still working on that one because I'm getting calls just recently saying, hey, what's going on here? It's flooding again. I mean, obviously had a very rainy few days here. It's raining this morning on the way here. It was raining hard. So rainy days and Mondays always get you down. So but anyway, I guess my question on that is, should we is our regular maintenance schedule enough, and do we need to budget to have that looked at more often, I guess, because we are running into these things that are causing flooding right now. And obviously Charleston's a little different than a lot of other places. If it floods in Columbia, it floods and goes away because it runs downhill. There is no hill here. It stays when it floods. So it's obviously a huge problem. We have to stay on top of it.
And I know you're staying on top of Shadowmoss as far as the recent break-ins. And the Charleston Police Department has apprehended, I believe, a 13-year-old kid allegedly involved with this situation. When you look back at the situation to right now, what still plays in your mind about that incident?
Well, Quintin, first of all, West Ashley's a great place to live, okay, and it's a safe place to live. I've lived in West Ashley all my life, and I can tell you that this was a bad couple of weeks that had happened, but it's not a regular occurrence that happens in West Ashley. And I got to knock on wood on that a little bit and hope that things have settled down.
Okay.
But since they've made that arrest, we really haven't heard a whole lot. Which is good. I hate that it was a 13-year-old. I hate that we've got youth out there that are bold enough to walk into somebody's house in the middle of the night. I just absolutely hate that that's part of the situation. We know that there was an adult involved in this, or somebody older at least, and there's still an ongoing investigation to that. But when the Shadowmoss stuff started, well, it wasn't just Shadowmoss. There were other areas where people were trying to go into cars, and they were just looking for opportunities for easy pickings, I guess. They were pulling door handles, and if the door was unlocked, they would go into it. Now, it's not 100%. I know there were some people's cars that were broken into that were locked, but the vast majority of what was happening around there was that cars were left unlocked, and people were going into unlocked cars. And they were looking for specific things, because I've been hearing that somebody may have left something valuable in there that was overlooked. So they were looking for specific cash or small jewelry, things like that was easy to grab and go. But that's how this whole thing kind of started out. And then we started hearing that, okay, vehicles are being stolen. And as we're looking at some of the vehicles that were being stolen were that somebody left the car unlocked and had a spare key in the glove box, or in the console or whatever. So a lot of what we were seeing with this was very preventable, and I think a lot of good things came out of this. Right after, the day after there were break-ins in Shadowmoss, the Shadowmoss community came together over at Crosstown Church, and we actually had a representative from Team 4. Representative Lynn Bennett was there, and of course, Councilman Harry Griffin was there. I think it was a good thing to pull that community together. I think there's a lot of good things that have come out of that. We have neighbors talking to neighbors now that didn't know each other before, or just didn't speak before. So people are getting to know each other very, very well. And it's happening in other communities as well. Forest Lakes is a great one that's happening. Some of Providence Commons that weren't speaking so closely before, all of a sudden neighbors are getting to know neighbors a whole lot better. There's a lot of these private social media groups now that are starting to form so that neighbors can feel comfortable talking to each other on social media, sending each other a message on these private closed groups, so they know that somebody from the outside isn't in their business, basically. So I think a lot of good things have come out. A lot of great education has come out of these break-ins, the car thefts and everything. We had a big meeting. We've got a great police chief, by the way. I think probably we'll find out, but I think people will see this. I think he's as fine a police chief as there is anywhere in the country, but Luther Reynolds. And he came and spoke to the community of West Ashley, but it was mainly for the western side of West Ashley where a lot of this crime was happening. And I think it was real good because we were able to, people were able to get to know him and Lieutenant Curtella, and you know, some others too, Sergeant Dasher and Captain Walker, all of those were there, and we were able to kind of get to know them, even though they were kind of telling us what was happening.
Right.
I think it put some people at ease because they understood what was going on, and they knew that we've got a great group of people that are working, but it also let our police officers know how great our community is as well. And we were able to bounce back and forth and talk to each other. Some interesting things came out of there. You had some middle school teachers that were talking about youth and working with youth and things like that. It was, you know, it was a real interesting meeting, but we're going to plan on having something similar. It may not be that big, but maybe on a quarterly basis, or, you know, just for communities. We may go into the neighborhoods, or we may have one, I don't know, maybe out at Bees Landing Recreation Center or something like that. And because Bees Landing kind of sits right in the middle of District 10, Harry Griffin's district, District 2, which is mine, and District 5, which is Marvin Wagner's. So district is, so that Bees Landing, it's actually in Marvin Wagner's, but that's kind of where a lot of this activity had happened. So, you know, I think we'll have some of those regular meetings, and I think it's going to be, you know, a real good thing. We do have a Citizen Police Advisory Committee that's been formed, and we'll hear more about that. It's brand new. It came out of the Elimination Project, but it was where we chose just regular citizens out of different neighborhoods. We tried to get somebody out of every district around Charleston. The mayor appointed a few people. We actually have a couple of high school students on there. And it's all brand new, but it's to basically give our police department a group to talk to represent their community, and have a little bit of communication so that we know what's going on, and our police force can be educated about how the community's feeling and what's going on. But I do feel like, again, West Ashley, I really think, and like I said, I'm gonna knock on wood, hopefully we don't have a crime tonight, but I do think West Ashley is a very safe place. There is an ongoing investigation to try to catch the other people that are going into these houses. But I do think we haven't heard, since there was an arrest made, we haven't had anything happen. So I really feel like we've got things under control right now. I think that our guys are doing a great job with Team 4 and our detectives from around the city that are working on these things. I think they're doing a great job, and you know, and I really believe that West Ashley is just a safe, great place, you know, great place to live.
And you talk about the youth. I got to talk to you about some developing news. And this is from a few weeks ago. It reads this in the Post and Courier. Charleston protesters, state legislators, call for ending Palmetto Rose ordinance. Where are we with the discussion about the Palmetto Artisans program in your mind?
Well, I hate that we had that incident with the young man. You know, there was a program that was obviously set up many years ago. Laura Yarborough and the Recreation Department were, you know, felt like they were doing a good job of training and helping young people have an entrepreneurial experience on this. And my feeling on it is that there needs to be some regulation of making sure that, for a lot of reasons, but making sure that people are safe out there doing when they're selling these Palmetto roses, and that we have some oversight over young people. You know, I think that was an unfortunate situation. From my understanding, that young man wasn't necessarily in trouble until he basically had some issues with that police officer, and you know, and had some things happen there that caused him to be in trouble, and resisting and fighting back, basically. But I'm not sure exactly where we are, but I do feel like we need to give young people as many opportunities as we can. We've got opportunities. I mean, we've got young people that are out there. You've got a lot of households where maybe there's a single parent, or you maybe even have a couple of parents, that are having to work in the evenings to make ends meet, and you've got a young teen that's kind of on their own after school hours or in the summertime on their own a lot with not a lot to do. And we need to find things for those to do. You know, I'm very active with youth in the community.
Right.
I coach middle school basketball,
Right.
and enjoy that, and have been doing that for probably been coaching basketball, I should say, for about 25 years. Basketball itself isn't the answer, but activities like that for young people. We need to make sure we've got programs. Some of that was brought out in that West Ashley meeting that middle school teacher had said. You know, there's not enough programs for everyone for that middle school age, particularly the kid that comes home from school, mom's working till 11 o'clock at night, and you got a 13-year-old or 12, 13, 14-year-old kid that has very little supervision, you know, is maybe has an older brother or older sister that doesn't have that adult supervision. We need to have something, you know, something for that. And I encourage people in our community to volunteer to see what we could do on trying to help those people. Like I said, I coach basketball. I go into the schools too. And another thing that the schools, as long as they can check you out and you don't have a criminal record or anything on your background, the schools will allow you to come in. I work with the Rotary Reader Program. It's a literacy program through Rotary. But what I do really, now this is with a younger group of people, but it can be done with all types of ages here. But I go into these Title I schools and try to spend a little bit of one-on-one time. The teachers choose these kids. Usually I will get a call around the first or second week of September saying we have a child that needs some one-on-one attention. Right. And we do read, we go through books and things, but the idea is to spend a little bit of one-on-one time with a child that maybe doesn't have that at home. Maybe mom's working late. Maybe things are just crazy with trying to make ends meet at home, and this child may need a little one-on-one attention. And we talk. We do more than reading. If we're reading, we talk about who are you in this book and what are your goals, and you know, give encouragement. Let them know they're going to be successful if they work hard. So you know, those types of things.
It's so good to hear. And I was talking with Harry Griffin for Quintin's Close-Ups a couple of weeks ago, and he's still to this day getting flack over the whole slavery resolution vote. If you could talk to those people about Harry Griffin, what would you say about him?
Oh, Harry's a good guy. He's got a good heart, and Harry's you know, Harry is a year older than my daughter, so I've known Harry probably since he was probably 6 or 7 years old, and I can tell you he comes from a great family. His Harry's grandmother and my mother actually grew up in the projects downtown on Fane Street together. So we've known each other's, our families go back a long, long way. And Harry's a good-hearted man. He wants what's he's on here because he wants what's best for the city of Charleston, for his constituents, and he has a huge heart. I mean, Harry would do anything for anybody, and he's just he's a great young man.
Well, Kevin Shealy, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Quintin.
You're welcome.
All right.